Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to the show on this Tuesday, March 7th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. Well, it's beginning. It's getting started. Says the White House is aware of the Silvergate situation. Well, if you don't know what Silvergate is, the bank is starting to go down. Probably the first one of many. This is a situation that's right now that is has similarities to the 1929 stock market crash, but it's just beginning. And I told you guys, I said at the beginning of this, I've said this for a while now, it's going to adversely affect the price of gold and silver and cryptos. It's because dollars are shrinking in the system at an incredible rate right now, and there's not as much capital or liquidity. First off, to understand this, you have to understand how the banks make money. And they're the biggest money makers out there. Fractional reserve banking is the biggest money makers out there. But you ever heard you'll hear in the news, such and such a bank has made record profits this year. Well, what happened was they made out a lot of loans. Say Joe comes into the bank and he's got a good business proposal, he's got a good floor plan, he's got everything else, he checks out, got great credit and everything else, wants to borrow $10 million. Well, the bank doesn't go into the vault and get $10 million and bring it out to give to Joe. All they basically do is make a book entry. That money didn't exist. They just make a book entry and now that money's created. Now Joe owes them $10 million with interest. And the bank does that multiple times. Suddenly the bank's made record profits for that year. The bank doesn't make profits from hiring a whole bunch of employees, building big new bank buildings and everything else. That's not how they make profit. That costs them money. Now, the interesting thing about all this is when the bank makes a loan to Joe or whatever for $10 million, if Joe suddenly decides, hey, you know what, I can't pay this back, I'm going to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, this is gone. Then what happens is this goes on the books then as what's called a non-performing loan that they made to Joe. Because he's not performing, he's not paying the bank back. Now it's a non-performing loan. The bank just can't create the money to make solvent their non-performing loans. Now the bank owes that money that they created. These are the rules. Basically, I'm just telling you guys what the rules are. Suddenly the bank's in trouble because now they owe $10 million because Joe couldn't pay it of this money that they just created. Suddenly it's a debt to the bank. So banks are careful about making out loans, especially in times when money is shrinking within the system. They realize that they could get in trouble themselves at that point in time, and especially with interest rates going up. Now, what about with a consumer? How does they come into all of this? Well, the consumer can get to a point where they're what's called tapped out. It means that economic times are getting hard, and consumers just aren't flush with money anymore like they once were. This is the situation that we're in right now. Consumers are getting tapped out. So consumers, meaning the general population now, can't make loans from the bank. They can't borrow money, so the bank is stymied. I heard that the banks out there right now are firing their loan officers en masse. It's because there's no loaning going on, and these guys are just sitting in the office pushing a pen around, looking at the clock, waiting until 5 o'clock or whatever when they can go home, because there's no work for them, the loan officers. So the few little loans, measly little loans that are being made right now by the banks are being done by the higher staff in the bank, like management, to cover what the loan officers used to do. Loan officers used to be busy. Oh, I can't stop right now. I got 4 more loans being processed. They're busy like that. The money was being created within the system. People were working. The consumer wasn't tapped out. But see, all of these things are self-feeding, self-perpetual cycles. If loans aren't being made, it's like the catch-22. If loans aren't being made from the banks, then people start losing their jobs. And then what happens is more and more consumers get tapped out. And then because they're tapped out, the banks can't make any more loans. And then if the central bank decides to make interest rates higher, it makes all this so much worse for these tapped out people. And that what they do is they create a cycle of deflation where the money starts to disappear from the system. And in a cycle like this, the dollar starts to be worth more. If you can imagine that in this sort of a cycle. So the dollar goes up. And that's because liquidity is draining out of the system, because all of the money is created from debt. So they borrow a big lump of money, say so-and-so borrows $10 million. That money is now debt. It's owed to the bank, it's a credit to the bank, but it's a debt to the debtor. So that's how all money is created. So they create all this money, and it can dry up so quick when conditions are right. And they're creating these conditions that are right for liquidity to dry up. So in the initial stages of this, it's a no-brainer. When things start to sell off, people have to make up for losses. Like if the stock market starts to sell off and things start to sell off in general across the board, they will sell things to get dollars to make up their what they owe, basically. And that's what's happening here. And that's why gold and silver, some of these people hold paper contracts to gold and silver. They got losses, they got money they got to make up. So what is it they sell? And because the silver and gold market are controlled by paper short contracts, when they sell these paper short contracts, the price goes down. And this is in the initial stages of this crisis that's happening right now. And that's where we're at right now. They're drying up liquidity. Powell tells Congress rates will likely be higher, interest rates. So this means even less borrowing. So the few people that are still borrowing money, and this means the banks aren't going to make record profits. They're going to make record losses. And then as this thing gets worse, you know what happens next? More non-performing loans. From times gone by when things were good. This is what's called a downturn in the economy. A very sharp. Now what's happening right now is an extremely sharp downturn in the economy. The last time one's been this sharp was not even 2008. This goes beyond 2008. The last time a downturn was this sharp was the Great Depression of 1929, when the stock market fell from the moon and crashed. And we're at the beginning phase of this thing right now. This thing's a monster. But what'll happen with gold and silver? Let's take a look at gold and silver right now. The silver price today, you know. Like I say, we're on the front side of this thing. And there she goes down. Silver price, it's just barely above $20 right now. It's went down almost $1 today. This is what I was frightened of. And I told you guys, I thought the initial phases of this thing, we're going to see prices drop on gold and silver. But as this thing gains momentum, we're going to swing in the other direction. And it's going to be massive. Because as this thing gets worse, you know what it reminds me of? I mean, Say there was a young guy and he wanted to go out and see tornadoes out in the Midwest, and he talked about it for years. I'm going to take a trip and I'm going to take a car with a couple other friends of mine. We're going to go out to the Midwest and we're going to chase tornadoes and everything else. So he's in the car and he's all excited and hooting and yelling, I can't wait to get inside a tornado. Yay! He's all excited. They drive out to the Midwest, and sure enough, they hit a big bunch of tornadoes. He hops run out of the car, and he's running across the cornfield and the tornadoes, and he got no fear whatsoever, and the tornado hits him. You know, whirls him up into the air and throws him, and he starts flying across the cornfields and stuff, but it doesn't really hit anything solid, so it doesn't kill him, you know. And his friends are all looking for him. Where did he go? They hunt for him, and they find him all covered with dust in a ditch about a half a mile away. They pick him out of the ditch, they dust him off, and they find out all he's got is a couple little bruises and scratches, nothing much, you know. And they say, you okay? And he says, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. They say, well, it's time to get back in the car. We got to go hunt more tornadoes, to the young guy. And the young guy says, no. I got to go home. I'm not going after any more of those. I'm done with that. He's scared then. It made him scared. Well, that's what's going to happen. See the Fed all gung-ho right now? Oh, yeah, they're just like the tornado guy. I can't wait to get to the tornado and get inside it. Oh, here it comes, boys. They're going to get hit with the financial tornado. It's starting. The Fed and them. And they don't realize how potentially powerful this thing is until it gets going. And then they see their jobs all on the line. They see the system on the line. And they get so scared, just like the young man who got thrown by the tornado. Wasn't scared until that happened. And you can't tell somebody ahead of time, hey, you know, it's an afterwards thing when they look back in hindsight. Then they say, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Well, this is the biggest boo-boo they're ever making. Oh, yeah, we're going to bring on a recession because we got to get inflation under control. Yeah, you're going to find out what deflation can do and how hard it is to stop once it gets going. And that's what we're headed toward right now. Dollars are leaving the system because all they are, they're just created from banks making loans. And what if the people can't pay those loans back? Then all of a sudden all that money just disappears and it's all left going on the banking system. So what are they going to do? Well, they're called too big to fail now at this point. So if they start failing, what does that mean, too big to fail for a bank? It means that they're so big and they're so interconnected to the other banks that if they go under, the other banks will go under too, that something has to be done. Well, there's only one thing to do. One thing's called a bail-in. And if they do that, the people are going to be just like, they're going to be bank runs. If they even try to touch your money, they know better. Found out in Cyprus. And the only other thing is to get a bailout again. So the way I see it, this is what's going to happen. I mean, it's a no-brainer that when the banks really start to get in trouble, the too big to fail banks, and they will because liquidity's drying up. No loans are being made anymore. You can't do that. Not in a debt-based system. The whole thing starts to come apart. And as it starts to come apart, there's only one way to go with all this, and one way it has to go, is they're going to have to bail them out all over again. And as soon as they do that, can we say hyperinflation? And you want to talk about things going... The problem with all of this is, and why it's so hard to forecast it and so hard for people to understand it is because we're moving in one direction right now. And at a certain point, this is all going to shift in the opposite direction. So right now, I mean, it makes sense to hoard dollars right now because of the direction we're going in. But the problem is this thing's going to boomerang. It's going to whipsaw in the opposite direction. And this is what we're going to see with gold and silver. We're going in this direction right now. But we're going to see this whipsaw. And all this is going to happen fast. Right on the edge of it. I can't begin to explain to you guys how powerful all of this is. Anyway, cryptocurrencies today, 22,231 for Bitcoin and 1555 for Ethereum. Taking a look at the Dow, we see the energy today. It's beginning. The energy is starting to begin. This downward cycle of energy. Down 557 points on the Dow Jones Industrial Average today at 32,874. Taking a look at the S&P 500. It's down 61 points at 39,086. No, 3,986, should say, the S&P 500. Taking a look now at crude oil, 77.93. It's down $2.53. How can I be so sure that the Fed's going to turn and change direction? Well, right now they're saying things like record unemployment, and we got good unemployment numbers, and we're doing this and we're doing that. This is all talking from this side. This is like the young guy talking about the tornado when he's on his way to see the tornado, and they're going to have to get met by this powerful crisis, and it's going to take a mind change of their minds. It's going to for us to have this 180-degree turn or 190-degree turn in the whole thing. We're going to have them change from what they want to do right now. It's going to be a personal change by the Fed chairman, all of the committee of the Fed, the whole FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee. They're going to all have to change their way of thinking. And why are they going to change their way of thinking? Because of the power that's going to be generated by this sudden deflationary event that they are orchestrating. Okay. Taking a look at bonds and rates today, we're looking at rising yields on the short end, and falling yields on the long end. But 3.97 on the U.S. 10-year. It's down 1 basis point, and the U.S. 30-year is down 3 basis points at 3.88. U.S. dollar index, well, of course it's going up. There's a liquidity shortage going on. Dollars are disappearing from the system faster than you can ever think. Because when you pay off loans, say these loans out there that the banks made, these big loans and stuff, that they got on their books, say they continue to be paid. As those loans are paid back, it diminishes the amount of liquidity in the system that's in the general economy. So the alternative to that is that they become non-performing loans and they don't get paid back. In which case the bank is on the hook for the money. So everything's great in a debt-based system when credit is being expanded. That's because it's built on a Ponzi scheme. But when you do the opposite of that, when credit starts to contract, it gains momentum. It's very hard to stop it, and it moves extremely quickly. And this is what's beginning to happen right now. And when I say it moves extremely quickly, it's because everybody wants to get their money back. They want to call in the money that they have out there, and everybody goes into super saver mode of whatever money they have left. And this accelerates this thing so fast that people start to sell, and they want to get ahead of the other guy. You know, the old thing on the other side, when credit was being expanded, you remember they said fear of missing out. That's a buying mentality. They wanted to buy because they didn't want to miss out on an opportunity to buy with their money. Well, this is exactly the opposite. This is, I want to sell before the price goes down so that I can get my money out of whatever as fast as I can. And I want to hold liquidity. I want to hold money, and the money's drying up. It moves. Bubbles take a long time to build, but when they pop awfully fast. And that's where we're at right now. This is the beginning of the popping of the everything bubble. And this is going to frighten them into submission, the central banks, to print like they've never printed before. But they're gonna wait too long. The longer they wait, the more traction this gains, this deflationary traction, the more they're going to have to print on the other end to try to prop it back up again. And they will in the end, or they'll see their whole system go right down to the ground if they don't. More power than a nuclear war. It'll bring the system down with more energy. Everything will cease to function within their system. So of course they're going to have to try to stop that, because that is devastating. It'll destroy them in the end if they let it go too far. Of course they're not going to let it go too far. They're not going to let it go, and I've said this to you guys before. Look for 28,000 on the Dow. And if they don't stop then, at 26 they'll surely jump in to try and stop it. But by that time it'll have gained sufficient momentum. You guys don't have to wait very long, because I think all this is starting right now. This is the breaking of the bubbles. They're breaking right now. And one of the big ones that's breaking right now is the real estate bubble and the banking system bubble. And everything. The whole everything bubble. Cars. They're all being repossessed left and right. And they're all sitting on car lots and nobody's going to buy them. So the price is going to drop like a stone. What people think things are worth, they're not really worth that if you got to sell it like right now. That's called marked to market. Like I say, a guy could have a business, and he could say it's worth $10 million, my business. Does inventory and everything inside there. But if you have to sell it at mark to market, what's it really worth? Some guy's walking away and said, I just bought the whole operation for $100,000. $10 million business. Be paid cash. It's like when you auction something off. You can say, well, okay, I'm auctioning off this old painting I found in the attic for $100,000, but then when it comes to auction, they might only bid $1,000 for the thing. If you're lucky. That's when we're on this side of this thing right now, where the dollar's going up in value. And like I say, we're headed toward that period in time, and I can't tell you exactly where it is, but it's in the future, when things get so severe with this deflation and the bubbles all popping that they switch and change directions, and then the dollar's going to go from being worth everything to being worth nothing. From hero to zero. Anyway, thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.